Welcome to another episode of the Rebranding Middle Age podcast. I'm going to call her a friend. May I call you a friend?
Yes, please.
Sophie Jane Hardy, actually, is my guest, and I look forward to diving in. So, Sophie is a writer, podcast host, and business coach inspired by nature's seasons and cycles. Over the past 2 decades, she's built ethical, intuitive, relational businesses and marketing strategies for individuals and organizations, including the Tree Sisters Million Trees campaign and Red School's global menstruality movement. Drawing on her background in not-for-profit communications, filmmaking, and women's health and leadership, she's passionate about supporting teachers, artists, healers, and creatives to build impactful, sustainable businesses. I love that. It's all right up my alley. Her happy place is walking along the Rivelin River in Sheffield, UK, with her husband, son, and Frodo the dog. Welcome.
Oh, it's so great to be here. And speaking of Frodo, he is sleeping right next to me and may bark at some point. So just to warn the listeners, if you hear a woof woof woof, that's Frodo.
Yeah, and it is welcome. It is
Thank
totally
you.
fine.
Because we can be
Yes,
messy here.
we certainly can.
Yes.
Yes. Sometimes my cat tries to beat down my office door when
Yes.
I'm in here. So, okay. So Sophie and I met through Red School. I believe I met you like through the work that you do supporting them and in particular through the podcast. I think that's where I first saw your name and that because you ho are host and you and I had a conversation once upon a time for that.
Yes.
And I think so. We're going to do a cycle check-in momentarily. Okay, so I'll save what I was going to say for that. So why don't we go there in honor of the Menstruality podcast because you do this with each of your guests. Let's begin with a cycle check-in, shall we?
I would love that. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I had been following your work for a while before reached out to you for the podcast. I'd been semi-stalking you and loving your
Oh,
writing
okay.
and your work.
Nice.
I've been with you for a while. Yeah, cycle check-in. Thank you. Oh, so I'm on day 13 of my menstrual cycle, and so I haven't ovulated yet, but I'm on my way, and I've got that pre-ovulatory rising energy. It's a really good time for me to have a conversation like this because I'm I feel most confident at this phase of the cycle and kind of less bothered about what I look like and what I sound like, and I just want to play and connect, and so
Mhm.
it's quite a delight. It's more easeful at this time of the month. And in terms of where I'm at in my life phase, I'm 43, so I feel like I'm baby perimenopausing, and that's like hot on the heels of postpartum because I have a 4.5-year-old. So it's been a really, I'm so glad you invited me on for this podcast because it's been a really weird few years, like 39 to 43. It's been a lot, and yeah, maybe we can get into it.
Yeah, I would really like to because I think it's so important as women, as humans, and also as women that we are truth telling, right? In safe spaces, and we're lifting each other up by sharing our stories and experiences. And honestly, I'm just so deeply grateful for the women who, have gone before me, who share health education or whatever the wisdom and education that I need to be able to kind of find my way. And then that gets to trickle down into my daughter's lives as well. So, okay, and I am firmly planted in my second spring in terms of my life cycle. I'm 2 years postmenopause this month. And what I was going to say a minute ago was that when you and I chatted for the menstruality podcast, I think I wasn't yet at that 1 year mark officially, like no period. And yeah, I was still trying to climb out of a deep, dark winter, maybe just at the cusp of spring. And it's taken me a while to move through that liminal space, that transitional space, recalibrate, and feel like, oh no, I'm here, feet solid, on the ground and in a new season of expansion again.
Wow. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
beautiful to feel for you. Yeah.
thanks. And it's taken a lot of work, a lot of hard work. So, and your experience has too. And so, yeah. So why don't we just go right there? So, I had shared in our talking points that from my stance, the 40s are a season of significant disruption, and that can include brave, vulnerable work, tremendous freedom work intertwined. So, how have your 40s felt and looked different from where you thought you were heading? And or what have been some of the dominant challenges and invitations to growth of this season? And that's sort of a big question. So we'll just like meander where we will.
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. I feel quite similar to you in that I feel firmly planted in a spring after a great big winter, as in, oh yeah, I think I know who I am. I think. I mean, always a work in progress, as you
Hmm.
would say, but I think I know who I am. But really, for the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, I've been in just tremendous identity shifts. Because in terms of where I thought I might be at this stage of my life, I guess I thought I might have a couple of kids and they'd be a lot older than they are.
Mm,
Because I always wanted to have children, and then I actually ended up ending a relationship at age 33, and then finding myself single and really wanting to be a mum. And then after about a year getting into a new relationship, but then it took us 4 years to conceive. So there were 4 years of really desperately wanting to be a mum and it not
mm,
happening, and then fertility procedures, and that was its own sort of winter, grieving, desperation,
mm,
hopelessness. It was so dark. It was so difficult, but we just have to carry on, don't we? Through these phases, through these winters, we just have to find our way. And then we did IVF when I was 39, and amazingly, it worked first time. And Artie, my son, was conceived, and then I went into the winter of pregnancy. And I just assumed that because I wanted to be a mum so much that I'd enjoy it and I'd be good at it. And oh my God, that's not been the truth for me. I
mm,
love that little person more than anything in the world. And parenting him is without doubt the hardest thing I have ever done.
mm,
Like a highly sensitive, very introverted person who really likes quiet and order and
hmm.
control
I hear you.
for things to unfold in a way I can predict. Oh, just yeah. So earlier when I said postpartum coming together with perimenopause, I feel like there's been these, yeah, two very confronting processes at work that yeah, just really turned me inside out. And I don't really know how to speak about it. So I'm curious how it's going to come out because I haven't done a lot of speaking about it yet. Um, but yeah, yeah,
Well, okay, so thank you first for even just diving right in there. I would love to ask you some questions with your permission about
yeah.
that experience of parenting, postpartum, and um, yeah, and above all, I want to just say thank you again for your bravery and willingness to be open, heart open, and because this storytelling is so important. And there can be so much shame and isolation in this world. And when, especially around parenting, that's like such a big area where we can all feel constant judgment. You're never quite doing it right or enough, and a common theme that comes up in my Brave and Beautiful community, even though not all the members are parents, but amongst the parents, is this idea that it can be really hard and you don't feel like you can talk about that. And even with, if we have children who have any extra needs or special needs or whatever, too, including mental health challenges, there aren't many places where we can safely talk about our experiences without people jumping in and making assumptions about what that means. Like, and of course, all it means is we're parents who love our children, and also it can be heart-wrenching, soul-shattering sometimes, or exhausting.
Yeah, I remember hearing your namesake, Krista Tippett,
Oh,
one of
yeah.
my heroes, that she's the interviewer on that amazing podcast On Being,
Hmm.
radio show turned podcast. And I remember hearing her say several years ago, when you become a parent, you mortgage out your heart for life. And that's
Yeah.
been my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then there are people who are childless, not by choice, who, it's, yeah, we always want to be tender, right? Around people who, like you were in that place of deep longing and almost desperation, you said, or hopelessness. And yeah. So, anyways, it can be really messy and complex, but long story short, I think we are strengthened, we become more resilient when we have safe spaces to share our truth. So can you share more about what are you, if you're willing, what specifically was so much harder than you expected around the parenting itself? Now, you mentioned strong introvert, highly
Mhm.
sensitive, you love solitude, etc. Were there other aspects of it that you weren't expecting?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I was expecting any of it because I was so taken by this longing that I imagined it was I had rose tinted glasses on. I just wanted it so much. And I'm really grateful actually to a doctor friend of mine, Susanna Pecci. When I was just about to give birth, she called me and she said, Soph, it just feels really important to say to you that it's okay if you don't enjoy this. And
And
that
did she
was
mean the birthing process?
parenting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay because she knew how much I'd wanted it. She'd been alongside me.
Mm,
So um, I was carrying a massive amount of anxiety with me looking back because um, you just fertility procedures are so nerve-wracking, and it was our one chance because we couldn't afford to do any more. We had to pay, we couldn't afford to do any more. So there's only one chance at this. And then the whole of the pregnancy, both my husband and I were just low level terrified that it would go wrong and that we
mm,
would miscarry or, something would go wrong. And then what I see now is I went into the birth and postpartum carrying that anxiety. And I think the thing that I didn't get, and I don't think it is possible to get until you've become a parent, is how little space there is to process anything at all. And that's probably been, if I could give a headline, that's probably the most difficult thing because I didn't realize how much I needed that like 2, 3 hours at the start of every day, quietly journaling with a cup of tea or taking a walk down by the river in silence away from all humans. Like, I love humans and I care so much about humanity, but I feel like I just must be away from humans regularly and frequently and just
mhm,
be by myself in nature in order to feel sane really in this world, especially with everything that's happening in the world today. Um, anyways, so I had a huge amount of anxiety. And so when Artie was born, um, we just got straight into it. He wasn't feeding. The feeding was going really it was really hard. We weren't taking to it, and he lost loads of weight. And so the midwives put us on this feeding plan where I had to breastfeed him for an hour, pump for an hour, sleep for an hour for a week, nonstop. And it was a kind of that kind of sleep deprivation uh, does crazy things to one's brain. And so we kind of hit the ground. What's the opposite of hitting the ground running? We just hit the ground. And yeah, the breastfeeding was very painful and difficult for 3 months, and I just felt like I was failing from the beginning.
Mm,
Yeah, oh, I could cry to look back on myself, and
mm,
the fact that I just didn't feel joyful all day long every day now that I had this one thing that I've been telling everyone I was so desperate for 4 years. Um,
mm,
and that yeah, everything hurt. I had an intense birth, and there was lots of recovery, healing and recovery on the other side. Yeah. And then there's the just watching them while they sleep, and just, are they going to keep breathing? I just remember watching him so much. Is he still breathing? Is he still breathing? And
mhm,
that anxiety just trickled out into the whole day. He's got a nappy rash. Is that, what have I done wrong? And he's making a strange noise. What is that? And if I could just have taken myself away and just given I wish I could have just given myself a hug, taken myself away to the spa for the day, and just helped my nervous system to regulate and soothe. I was in such an amped up state. I mean, probably postpartum anxiety, but we were in the middle of COVID and
mm,
lockdowns, so the healthcare wasn't available. I actually remember a midwife coming to visit me, and she gave me a questionnaire, and she said, "Well, you're showing all the signs of postpartum depression, but you seem fine, so I think we'll just leave it." I thought,
mm,
must have just been very good at masking.
mhm,
Yeah, yeah.
mm.
Like, it's difficult to go back there, but remembering it from where I am now, it's beautiful to feel how I've got my feet on the ground again. Yeah.
What would you tell that younger you 4 years ago? What did she need to know?
Mm. A lot of people kept saying to me, "You know best, you know best." And that's kind of what I would want to say, but it didn't ever land. What would I say to her? Mm. It's okay to not be okay. Yeah. Like this struggle and fight to somehow make all of this mess okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're safe. You're safe. Mm.
I really think that the number, well, I'm not going to speak about world events and all of that, just in the bubble of anything that is sort of ish within our realm of control. I think the number one cause of our suffering is the judgment that it should be different. We should know how to do it differently, or always the undercurrent is better, right? We're failing, we're not enough. We should know how to do this in any realm of life. It's a recurring thing that as women, certainly in the middle season of life, I hear it over and over and over and over in different language. And also it's a recurring theme for me that I need to attend to, turn towards, and give her a hug, as often as needed. Because yeah, it's like if we can learn and really, okay, so this is so deeply connected for me to seasonal living. One of the core beautiful bits of wisdom that permeates all of life is messy. You're not doing it wrong. And if we can sink into that a little bit more, then at least some of that shame and judgment can dissolve. And we can be in the pain, in the discomfort, in the not knowing, but without all of that heavy weight.
Yeah. Because what it was working in me, that mess and that chaos, I can see it now. I can see how I'm surrendered and given to the moments of my life so much more now. I'm not trying to grip in the same way and hold on and make things happen and push and grind and hustle. I'm more regulated. I'm just more here. I'm more physically present. I'm more embodied. Because I was like, I was worked in that crucible, in a way maybe that nothing else could do. And maybe it was the combination of perimenopause and my hormones shifting and postpartum that really worked me. Because I remember being awake in the middle of the night, um, even after Artie had started sleeping through the night, which happened at about 18 months. And I would, I didn't know who I was and I didn't know what I was here for. And that had never happened to me before in my life. I've always been quite clear. Ever since I was like 11, I've always been quite clear that life is here for the grabbing and the making the most of it. And I just had a very intense sense of my own mortality. So I think it's since my grandmother died when I was 11. I think that's what happened and opened it up for me. That being quite driven. And suddenly I was, 41 years old in the middle of the night, dreading the next day, another day of being absolutely shit at this thing that I wanted so much. I
Hmm.
don't think I am actually shit, but I've
Hmm.
really felt like it. Compared to my job, which um I'd gone back to work part-time at that point, but I was good at it. I know what I'm doing with writing and coaching, and I was hosting the podcast by then, and I was getting into the swing of it. I'm like, yeah, yeah, cool. I know what I am. I know what I'm for. And then I'd get back into the parenting and just Artie is a very deeply feeling kid. He's always had massive emotions, and uh, it was hard for me to not see, and still is hard for me to not see that his big emotions are his own natural expression. Like he's just a kind of a more Eeyore kind of guy, more than like Tigger. He's just, and that's it's not a failing of mine. It's not because I'm a bad mum, and it's who he is. He's a wild, bodacious creature, and he's got big feelings. Anyway, I digress. So I'd be awake in the middle of the night, just dreading the next day and feeling like I just didn't know what my life was for anymore. And like I was just free falling. And that lasted for probably a year looking back. And that was, yeah, like 41 to 42. Yeah, you know
Well,
those.
I wanted, yeah, I don't know if I shared this with you before, like on the conversation we had before, but um, when I was 39 and I was just unhappy. I was homeschooling three kids. I mean, my primary dream was to have these children and the family, and I didn't regret that. Like, I adore them, and it's so hard. I was sleep deprived. My youngest is and was an insomniac. Now we know she's autistic, ADHD. We were trying all the things for big emotions, no sleep, lot of food issues, emotional dysregulation, and also she was this joyful little human who was like singing and like, and anyways, it was wonderful and really hard at the same time, both ends. But anyway, so it wasn't about them. I think it was really more about also, it's just that these things coincide. They're all tangled up together, so it's so hard to unpick, right? But I think for me, it was also what I would now call sort of that midlife crossroad, where it's like there's a longing, a call to more.
Yeah,
And by more, I don't mean stuff. I mean more freedom, more joy, more heart openness, more being our true selves, less, carrying the weight of shame and inner judgment and people pleasing and performing and all of that. But I was in this state and I was living also with chronic pain. And, anyways, and I went to, our family went to this. I mean, most people here aren't Canadian, but anyways, Drumheller, this place where the kids go see the dinosaurs, and there's all the dinosaur fossils. That's not the point. The point of the story is we stayed in this Airbnb, and there was this friend group of, I can't remember if there were six or eight people, and they were in their 70s, sort of age range, but 70, older than 70. And they were vibrant and interesting and living fully. And we sat outside in the garden and had these good conversations. And I just remember looking at them like, I'm 39. And these humans over 70, they have more vitality and energy and joy than I have in my little toe. Or no, that doesn't make sense. In my whole body, they have more in their little toe. And anyways, and I was open with them ish about it. And one of the women at least said, at that time I was living in severe chronic pain. She said, Krista, go get your hip replacement done. Like I was so afraid. And also I had little people. And how do you be a mother with bedridden or in, without while you're taking care of kids and all the things. So anyways, but that was a catalyst for me. And all of a sudden, I realized I called and got on the schedule for my hip replacement. I realized one day I'm going back to school. I'm going to start building my business. Like just stuff started moving. And anyway, so there's something about these major crossroads, right? As we move through our life cycle that they're so important and they're so vulnerable and hard and it's exactly what needs to happen.
Yeah. Yes.
And so being afraid of them, so that is one of the things that we can learn, right? Is like how to be in the discomfort, how to feel fear and not hide permanently under the covers. A little bit of hiding is okay. I think
Yeah.
that's just part of being human. But how to keep growing that capacity and anyways, yeah.
So beautifully said. I also remember, do you remember this? I remember having this distinct feeling that if I am blessed to live to be 80, I am halfway through. And what have I done so far? Like, how have I actually shown up? And I'm halfway. I've only got another half left. Like, I better really show up now. Something something was being, like I said, being worked in me and like distilled down through some kind of like gnarly, gritty process, but distilled down so that I could find a new expression of what it is that I'm about and what it is that I'm here to do, and then live into that. And I think the reason why I'm feeling more confident and buoyant and together now is because I'm inside that river somehow. I couldn't quite give voice to how it's unfolding, although it's got a lot to do with writing, which is really exciting for me. It's like a new identity that I'm stepping into, and so I can feel that the fruits of that, are starting to show up. But it's very much the spring of it. So it's just little buds here and there, little snowdrops peeking out from the snow, rather than a robust sense of this is what it is and this is what it looks like.
Hmm.
Did you have that feeling of halfway, or is that just me?
I have ne no, I've never had, so the way that I relate to what you just shared, and that may not be your experience, is more around like time urgency. And I hear people express it. I don't ever have that. I like my practice of seasonal living certainly allows me to witness like, oh, there's going to be good stuff ahead. There's that I and I'm aware that I could die today or tomorrow. And so I don't live with that. I have I haven't met anybody else who has it quite this experience, but I've always been a vision, had a strong vision. I lost it in the menopause transition where I knew I needed a new vision, and it took a while for that to form. But I have these core dreams of my life, and they're so clear. And well, they're so clear, and also I had to grow into them. Like
Mhm.
you don't ever really know, right? You have sort of the inkling, and then you have to like step into the waters, and like you're doing right now, and you never know what's going to unfold. So I think my focus is always there. Like it's like the knowing that it's time to step into what's next,
Mhm.
that like calls me forward, but it's never related to I may only have X number of years left because, and I think probably related to like my parents both died a long time ago. A lot of my favorite sort of elders they died young. I mean, I do have a grandpa who's turning 102. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, that guy's a trooper. Um, and I have no desire to live till I'm 102, just saying. but I do think that the loss, a lot of loss has maybe, I can't say for sure, maybe been part of my work of like, I look up and I cast my vision and then I come back to this day. I think that's been one of the most significant parts of my journey, probably in learning how to survive and thrive as a person who had wanted to die when I was younger and then went through tremendous pain. And is this sort of don't wish any day away. Even
Yeah.
after the death of my son, that was part of my practice was this day too is my real life.
Mm, mm.
Don't wish it away. Be here. And I couldn't always be here. Sometimes I was dissociating. Sometimes I was drinking myself to sleep to survive, but that was my best ability in that space. But that, so yeah, so that's sort of more where I land.
Beautiful. I love everything, absolutely everything about what you just said. But and I think one of the things that was so hard in that early mothering window was I lost control. I lost track of all of the things that have kept me sturdy and stable and
Uh,
whole as a person. So like my gratitude practice, for example, like which is kind of probably my version of what you're saying, like no matter what, there are 8,000 things to be so grateful for in this
yeah.
moment. But being so deep sleep deprived and so physically broken, so in pain and all of it, it's like I couldn't find those resources. I lost all my resources.
Mm.
Thinking of right now is something that Alexandra always says from Red School, which is where I host the Menstruality podcast. She always says the death part of a death and rebirth cycle always feels like death. And that it was so true for me. I didn't have this sense, like Inanna down in the underworld, the goddess down in the underworld, where she's just down there in the dark, um, looking death in the face. She doesn't know that she's going to rise and come up to
Hmm.
earth again. I just couldn't feel that a rebirth was ever going to happen. It was
Yeah.
that sense of I am stuck here now in this hopeless, meaningless, terrifying place. So that, yeah, the death
Hmm.
part of a death and rebirth cycle always feels like death
Oh
was so
yeah.
true for me in that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean I always think that like by the time you hit 40, 50, 60, 70, it's like you've been through some shit. So you anybody listening probably can relate to their own experience of, the death pre-rebirth.
Yes.
No guarantees and also like and I want to offer hope. I want you to know that, like, not you, Sophie, but like people listening, like a seasonal living practice can provide that hope. When you do have the resourcing to create your rhythms and rituals that are the most grounding, resourcing practices, including your, like in the Brave and Beautiful community, we'll do two lists. One of them is when life is mostly okay, and the other is you're barely functioning, there is crisis and chaos, and your brain cannot come up with an idea. You need a list taped on your cupboard that
Yes.
says, do this.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's really like low hanging fruit. And those things hold you steady. And I've shared many times, but my morning routine is I talk about a simple portable morning routine because I practice that through the worst season of my life. I can take it on the road. I can be in a hospital room. I can do some version of that. So because like you just expressed that really well, that like when do we need our resourcing like habits and practices? In the darkness.
In the shit. Yes. So much.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we can't access them naturally. This is a side note, but I think it was with a client. I'm not sure, but was talking about how, sometimes we get knocked to our knees. Like you said, we're not
Don't hit the
landing on
ground
our feet. We're
running.
just flat. Um, Everything goes out the window. So, like after Jairus died, I stopped. I was a very healthy eater and I took supplements and blah, blah, blah. Everything ground to a halt like this. it took me at least 3 years before I could even start adding back in supplements.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
sounds so basic. It was
Mm,
not basic.
mm. I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, like just remembering how to eat, remembering how to do basic things, remember, and then slowly, slowly, slowly. Of course, we always want it to be faster and easier, right? And more graceful.
Yeah. Yeah. But that I think this is also the thing about being in the 40s, and I recognize I'm young in the 40s, so I know I've got a journey ahead of me. For those listening, they're like, she doesn't know what's coming. I'm sure there are fun adventures ahead, but these 40s, my body is so different. My metabolism is so different. The way my body moves and works is so different. And really wasn't expecting that. And maybe again, that's the combination of postpartum and the hormone shifting now. But I'm only just feeling like I'm in my body again for the
Mm.
first time in 4 years. I haven't recognized this body. I think that's part of the identity shift too, isn't it? Like just physically we can shift so much.
So, I haven't even moved on to any of the other talking points, but I want to ask you about that. So, because I was chatting with one of my friends. We walk together every Thursday in the wooded trail, and she is prob somewhere in perimenopause. She's a few years younger than me, and her cycle is just sort of getting a little bit less predictable. And so I shared that in that season of, when if you're a cycle tractor and you have cycle tracker, and you use that, it's really stabilizing, right? That like menstrual cycle tracking, and then all of a sudden it's like you feel unmoored, right? So that's where I shifted to lunar tracking, because even though it's not the same, it provided those regular anchor points that at least they got me to pause and listen inward, notice what's emerging, because that's one of the most important things is like tracking our cycle, especially like for me, the balsamic moon or sort of just before the bleed. That's where like the sky is falling, everything sucks. I'm like, nothing, there's no hope. There's like, and it's like, okay, notice and go to bed. You don't make any decisions, you just notice. And then sort of after you can like mine for the wisdom in that after. But anyway, so I had just shared that like last week with my friend if she was interested in that lunar tracking. So the point of me bringing this up is, okay, you got your body, you're familiar with it again. You've come through birthing a child and that hormonal recalibration, and you know where you're heading. You know that you're heading towards, later perimenopause and the menopause transition. Can you share a little bit about what your relationship to menstrual cycle tracking is
Mhm.
and how you'll use that to support you moving forward through the it's not only about hormonal shifts. We recognize menopause is so much more, but like even that part of the being in your body and trusting the wisdom of your body.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, my relationship with menstrual cycle tracking began in my late 20s when I was experiencing massively disturbing premenstrual phases, but I didn't know that. I didn't know there was anything cyclical about it. I
Hmm.
just knew that I was probably crazy and really angry and cried a lot. And then I found um, a friend gave me Alexandra Pope from Red School, her this book that she wrote ages ago called The Women's Quest, and it's a 13-month cycle tracking journey. And after about 3 months, I could look back at my menstrual cycle tracker and see, oh, okay, the rage, grief, fury, tears begin at about day 22 and then they wrap up at about day 26, 27. It's actually just for this period. And it was such a light bulb time for me. It was so liberating to see that this was cyclical. And then there was also guidance in the book around what's at work here in, what I now know to be the inner autumn of the menstrual cycle, this premenstrual phase, that it's this time of truth speaking, discernment, understanding what is right for us and what isn't, what we need. And I guess I see it as a time for like healing the wounds that patriarchy has left in all of us, like all bodies living inside patriarchy, but especially menstruating ones and women. And healing the early sexual traumas in my teenage years and early 20s, and it's just been so wonderful to have that. It was so wonderful to have that healing process in the inner autumn, and it got me totally fascinated with the menstrual cycle. I then had the cool experience of working for Tree Sisters, like you mentioned in my bio. It was a women's reforestation organization, and we planted, they've now planted 30 million trees, I think, but we planted a million trees together, and it's still probably the best thing I've ever done, apart from Havarti. But our chief of operations, Edwige Fairchild, she guided us to implement menstrual cycle awareness and tracking as a team so that we managed our workload through a menstrual cycle lens. So, for example, when I
Mm,
showed up at a team meeting on day 23, we gave that part of ourselves a nickname. So Grumpy Gertrude was mine. And I
mhm,
could say, look, I'm on day 23. I'm feeling really tender. I'm feeling really angry. Maybe I shouldn't be the one to do that interview today. Maybe someone else should do that and I'll go and edit that thing instead. Or, whatever. We could shift the work around depending on what
mm,
was up for the different members of the team. And we also planned the whole organization around the seasons of the year, again, guided by Edwige. So I really got to see not only does this cyclical seasonal living have a massive personal benefit for me, making sense of who I am. I'm not crazy, mad, bad, and broken. I'm a cyclical creature, but also we were able to put it into action as a team and see what we could create when we were living from the sustainable cyclical way rather than pretending that we can be on 24/7 and
yeah.
pushing. Uh, so it was wonderful. And then I just went on after that to work with Red School and create the menstruality podcast. And now I've had these 200 conversations about the menstrual cycle, and people often say, "Really? Are there 200 things to say about the menstrual cycle?" I'm like, I think there are 8,000 and more. Who
Yeah.
knows how far we'll go?
Yeah. And congratulations on 200. That's a big
Yeah.
deal. It's a lot
Yeah.
of work too, and energy.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
It held me together through the through the dark times, just being able to show up for these, like we're doing right now, these vulnerable, honest, messy, real conversations in the middle of all
Mhm.
that was such a lifeline for me. So I'm so grateful for that podcast. It's helped me
Yeah.
a ton. Yeah.
Um, this is not in your talking points, so um, do you have a soul calling? Do you have a sense of
Mm.
mission, purpose, soul calling, any whatever?
Yeah, I'm completely fascinated with this idea and way of being. And I believe my sense is that we all have it, it's whether we kind of tuned into the radio waves of it or not. But yeah, it's been very strongly with me since my 20s. Um, and it changes, my expression of it changes. I've been really guided here by my teacher, Shamali Ardar from the Awakening Women Institute. She's called Shamali Gad now, actually. But this sense of the river inside me, the creative river inside me that has been with me since I was born and will be with me until I die. And I want to live from that place and create from that place. And yeah, the words change to describe it, or like I put a different hat on or a different suit on, in the world, a different role. But it's always, if I'm in the right place, doing the right thing with the right people, it's like it's always lined up with that. How about you? Do you feel the same? Is that your way of understanding it?
Well, for me, like I've had these three core dreams in my life,
Mm.
and the first was my family, a
Yeah.
creative, compassionate family. And there's, more around that. And the second was I always wanted my own business. So I mentioned to you that I lived 18 months in the UK and I worked one of my jobs. I worked in a nightclub and I worked in a snooker club. And I loved when I was alone running the snooker club, and I would like receive the big barrels, like kegs of beer and whatever, lager and whatever. I loved all the organization, the sort of like management. So since that time, well, actually, my first business idea really was at 16, and then that I was 19, 20. And then, yeah, until I started A Life in Progress, I would dream of different business ideas. And one of the main things that where I knew it wasn't right yet because I was homeschooling my kids and I really didn't want a lifestyle where I was dragging kids into this like a brick and mortar like and and I'm somebody who seems to really need to sort of like focus on one at a time. Like it's not like the others fall away. Like my family never falls away, but I I need to pour myself in
Mm,
to
mm,
something wholeheartedly. So anyway, so that was number two. And I built this soul honoring business over the past decade. And my third is, I think, my soul calling, what I now feel more comfortable just using that language. And it is connected. They're all interconnected. Like I have them written out in my planner as a Venn diagram. They're all sort of overlapping. But when I think my 25-year-old daughter was a baby the first time I heard this sort of inner thing, like, I want a voice. And I was like, what does that even mean? I want a voice. Like, but it was so strong. It was potent. And and it never left me. And then it started to sort of like come out in some different ways. And my normally I have one mantra for the year, but a couple years ago I realized, oh, now I have two. I have my second spring mantra, which is use your voice in a powerful way. And then I
mm,
have my yearly mantra. And so this is really this sort of second half or this like beginning the cycle again is sort of the time of stepping into the soul calling. And so there's lots of pieces around that and like you I think these things can be expressed differently in different seasons of life and all of that, but really owning that and being willing to be in the because it sounds corny to say this to some people like you I'm fine you're I feel like you get it. um
mm.
but a lot of people they're like, you what? Like a soul calling? What? That's weird. Or whatever. However, like these visions I have and the dreams, and it's like, but they're so present. And part of me, I live in a realm, I feel like of part of, I have to actually work really hard at keeping my feet planted on the earth
Same.
because yeah, otherwise I can get lost in the visioning and the dreaming and the even like longing for a better world like and the heartache of that and the intensity and so I have to really work and the cycle tracking and that is one of the ways that I keep my feet my body like I keep myself in my body and feet on the earth and those deep roots that hold me so I don't drift away. Anyways, whatever. But that, oh yeah, what I was gonna say is like it's like I can part of my vision, I see things that they're already there. It's
Mm,
like the knowing is so strong. It's like I know all I have to do is keep taking one more tiny step because it's already real. It's there. I can see it and feel it. And then the other part of me, then my brain goes, what? Don't admit that out loud. What are people going to think? What if it doesn't happen? What if you dream and you come crashing down? All the fear, all the noise, right? And a lot of it obviously rooted in heartache and trauma and insecurity and whatever. And also just learning how to be in this world. And so anyway, so that's part of, I think, this really stepping into that soul calling is really owning the way that I'm wired and the gifting and also the balance, the tension between the ebb and flow, which I've been fortunately like practicing through seasonal living in some capacity now since like early 30s and 33, 34, somewhere around there, where I was first introduced to menstrual cycle tracking, probably at the same time as you, because I'm 10 years older than you. So I was
mm,
thinking that um, Yeah, so learn, not shutting down our gifts, really be expressing our true selves and letting ourselves shine because I really just believe that when we are in our freedom, wholeness, and joy, we spill over and make the world a better place. So,
Yes,
yeah.
agreed.
Anyways, that was my big long-winded response.
I just love it. I love it. I'm so glad that I asked. And I feel like there's another piece I'd love to bring in if we have time around menstrual cycle tracking and the
I'm
calling.
good for time, but I see that, we're meandering, but if you're good for time, we can continue.
I'm good. Yeah, somebody stop me. This is my favorite conversation to have.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of um for me the most important part of menstrual cycle tracking, which is when I menstruate, when I bleed, that is my time to go into my own inner winter retreat time. And that is what makes everything possible in my life, I've come to see.
Yeah.
And I got to see this month because I got zero menstrual rest this month, and I'm really getting to see, woof, when it's not there, I
Yeah.
feel really uprooted from myself.
Yeah.
So for, yeah, since I was 28, I've had this practice, which has been hard as a mum, but I'm getting there, of pulling away from the world and into myself for 1, 2, 3 days. And it doesn't mean I'm not doing things in the world. I'm still doing things, but my focus is inside. I'm switching the phone off. I'm not watching things as much. I'm just with myself. And I've had some really, really profound moments with those menstrual retreats, especially in nature, that have formed my understanding of my soul calling more than anything else. And one of them that's coming to mind really strongly, that often does, is when I was in Scotland when we were 2 or 3 years into the infertility time and I was struggling. So we went to the middle of nowhere to the Outer Hebrides in Scotland just to get away from everyone. It was Christmas time. I didn't want to be around families. I didn't want to be around children. I just wanted to get away because I was suffering. And I was walking along the beach on this incredible, wild shoreline in the far reaches of Scotland. And I stumbled across a probably 6 or 7 meter long skeleton of a whale.
Oh, wow.
It was so striking, these bright white bones against the big grey and brown stones of the beach. And I sat with it for days. I came back and sat with these whale bones. And I did a bit of research and I learned that because of deep sea underwater testing, 80 of these whales had been killed and had washed up on the beaches the summer before. This was the winter.
Mm.
And I sat with the bones of this whale and I was menstruating, and it was my kind of focus for my menstrual retreat. And I imagined this whale. I discovered that they were deep sea diving whales. They go 3,000 meters down, and then rise back up. And I listened and listened and listened. And the message I got from this whale was dive deep and rise.
Mm.
And those words have
That's
become,
beautiful.
it was so profound. And those words have become so meaningful to me in a million ways and a million moments since then, and have guided me and held me all the way through the motherhood initiation, all the way through postpartum. And I still don't know what they mean, but it's like one of
Mm.
these gifts from life, these mysteries from life.
Hmm.
Dive deep and rise. I feel like they're a message for these times. I feel like there's so much wisdom in them. And yeah, so in terms of menstrual cycle tracking and cyclical living, like I think that is the key, is finding our way, whether it's the dark moon or if we're bleeding and it's menstruation. And it can be hard if you suffer with menstrual pain. It's not an easy
Hmm.
time for a lot of people. But if there is a way to surrender into stepping back, slowing down, turning inside, I think there's so much gold waiting for us in those
Hmm.
moments that can inform who we are, who we can become, and what we can bring forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. So just yes, the that. time in the, I don't menstruate anymore, obviously, but like that practice held me for sure. And then um my seasonal checkpoints now, especially like my at the solstices, it is arbitrary, like, but for me that works because my birthday is at summer around summer solstice, so that's my sacred visioning time. And then
Mm.
I take a couple weeks at Yule again. But those like anchor points where I really go inward and downward and I'm listening for wisdom and direction, and but also throughout my day and my week, like that solitude and the listening, it's like it's the only way I can be myself, my healthy self, and have anything I think of worth to offer anybody else, right? Because then I'm giving from this wisdom, not from ego, not from wounding, not from trying to make people like me or whatever. And it's just like a much more kind of pure and honest place. Anyway, hopefully we've convinced everybody now to find their own practice. um, okay, so we I still want to ask you about those 200 episodes, and if we have time, I would love to hear a little bit more about how you run your own business through the lens of cyclical living. And at any time you tell me if you have to go, because if we go longer, I'll just cut this into two episodes, probably. So
Yeah, the 200 episodes. I think one of the things you wanted to speak about was what am I taking away, or how am I living into the wisdom that I'm getting from these conversations, right?
yeah, I was wondering, like, I mean, that's a lot of amazing conversation and real conversation. And I was curious about what are some of your most profound shifts that have come from having these 200 conversations?
Yeah, I mean, one that comes to mind, it comes back to menstrual retreat again because I think it's the um kind of the engine that fuels everything when it comes to menstrual cycle awareness. But one of the conversations that I've had in this series, really, of conversations with Indigenous teachers, and the big shift here for me has been to decolonize my mind and my life and myself, to see that, yeah, I'm a daughter of colonizers, and that way of living that's about extracting and individualism, and conquering is has been strongly within me in my life, and I want to inhabit different ways of being that are about collective care,
Mm,
about true belonging, about belonging to this earth, about reciprocity, all the good things. So I've been able to have these wonderful conversations with Indigenous teachers who have brought this wisdom to me. And one that's coming to mind is a woman called Dr. Cynthia Ingar, and she's an Andean wisdom medicine keeper. She studied with grandmothers in the Andes Mountains for several decades now, and she got to do these 13 menstrual retreats in a row, 4 days and 4 nights of complete silence and solitude when she menstruated. And for her, it was an initiation in what she calls the ukupacha, which is a Quechua word for the realm of the feminine, is how she translated it. And it was so amazing to hear someone give voice to this ancient wisdom that's beautifully still intact and alive today, that speaks to my direct experience of how my consciousness shifts when I menstruate and when I yield to the process. I do feel like I'm entering a different realm. And when I was pregnant, I felt like I was in the ukupacha. And in postpartum, I felt like I was in the ukupacha, like a different realm of
mm,
consciousness when I was breastfeeding and nursing. And also when I was grieving. And Cynthia said, yeah, periods of grief, birth, postpartum, death, these are all in the Quechua, the Andean way of seeing it, or all live within this realm of the ukupacha.
mm,
And it's been such a gift to connect to that intact thread of wisdom from the ancient people, because I live on a land where our indigenous wisdom was broke, almost totally broken, especially here in England, a bit more intact in Scotland and Wales and Ireland. But there's very little known of the pre-Christian English ways. And it's been such a gift on the podcast to be able to connect with through Latham Thomas with this, she calls it the African ancestral technology that traveled with the women who were pregnant and birthing on the ships that they were stolen from their land in Africa and taken to um, the Americas. It's and they were midwifing for each other on the boats. And Latham Thomas, who's this doula and birth worker, speaks of how she works now with Black women and they are uncovering their African ancestral birth technology that's still living inside them, is somehow in their blood and bones. And yeah, it's just such a wealth of conversations about, yeah, really about the wisdom that is within us all when we can drop below and outside of and around these colonizing ways of being and living. Yeah, so
Mhm.
much more to say about that, but that's probably been my biggest shift from the podcast. I'm so grateful for it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's something, another day, perhaps another way I would love to explore that more, but I feel that like just like reverberating in me, like as you're sharing that, because there's so much happening. Like sometimes I think that some people, like you've expressed, they're reconnecting to, coming home to the ancient wisdom of their people and ancestry. I think too, sometimes we're breaking intergenerational patterns of dysfunction. And um, I feel that sometimes, like that's the work I'm doing isn't just for me, it isn't just for my daughters, or even for my son, though he's not living here anymore. The work I do is also for him.
Mm.
But I think it also is breaking generational chains and old patterns. And so, but again, it's like we don't, because we can't, like, we don't have like an evidence base for that, like that we can wrap something up in a neat and tidy bow and say, here, there's proof of how this works.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's deep time stuff.
and so needed, like, it's so needed. Yeah. And I will say it's just my final note as I try responding to that. I think my inner self is like responding to that is just like, and that's where I'm heading more and more and more and more is
Mm.
trusting and living from that, even though I have Celtic roots on one hand, and I don't know what the like Eastern European roots, and I don't even know what any traditions come from there, but that ancient sort of wisdom, that old wisdom, and even the collective unconscious, which is another topic, because I guess, so I shared this somewhere along the lines, but I used to talk about these visions I have. And a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I read a book by a psychiatrist, and but he talks about he was using the language of numinous experiences. And I
Mm.
was reading what he was talking about. I was like, that's exactly what happens to me. And he describes it as it's a breakthrough of the unconscious into the conscious.
Mm. Mhm.
And and he t- furthering the conversation, he talks about the collective unconscious, right? That's undefinable stuff that we share and we can't always find language for, or in Western culture, it's just deemed like ridiculous or, because it's unquantifiable and stuff. But anyways, yeah.
I got to interview Toko Pa, another dream worker,
Mm,
and she calls it the eco psyche, which I love. This web
okay.
of collective unconscious that connects us
Ah,
all, the eco
okay.
psyche. Mm.
I actually just bought her maybe Dreamweaver or something like that, like
The
her
dream
book.
way.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I just bought it like a week ago or something like that. Anyway, okay, so let's wrap up through at least a short conversation, if it's okay, about working and creating through the lens of seasonal or cyclical levels. living. I can't talk anymore. Um, okay, so for your own creative work and business, so you shared before with Tree Sisters the practice, which is so beautiful that they operated that way, and probably still do. I know that in with Red School, they have their practices, I believe, because I've heard them share. I've read their books and I listen, to episodes that they where they're sharing of their experience.
Yeah.
So, but you, Sophie, as a human, how are you practicing this in your life, in your creative work, or
Yeah. Well, maybe if I look at how my relationship to my work and business shifts throughout these four seasons or four phases of the cycle, and then for those listening who aren't menstruating, many of the women and people that I work with work in a similar way with the lunar cycle.
Mhm.
But starting with the bleed, with the dark moon, with menstruation, that's my time where I'm listening and receiving. And often what I'm listening and receiving for the business doesn't make much sense in the moment. Like you were saying, things pop up from the collective unconscious, or I'm sitting with a whale skeleton and it says dive deep and rise. And I don't really
Mhm.
know what that means, but then it makes sense later. Or sometimes I just download a whole idea for a course like a book or a movement sometimes for 5 months in a row. It's my business
Nothing big,
delivering me this
just a
movement.
movement.
I was like, really? I've got a 3-year-old, and you're like a movement. I still might do it one day. Um,
Hmm. I believe
but
you.
thank you. Yeah, so my job, I feel there is to listen and receive. And the more I've practiced that, so it's probably been 15 years that I've been doing this now. The more I've practiced that, I can see that the most solid ideas, the ideas that really take root in my business, come from that place. And if I don't hear them first time properly, they just come back again. So I can usually, if I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about running that workshop, or I'm not sure if that's the direction I want to go in my business, if it comes back again and again in the bleed, then I know it's a good one to follow. And Red School speak about this idea of bleeding on it. If you've got a big
Hmm.
conundrum or a challenge in your business, to take it into the dark moon or the menstrual bleed. And then coming into the pre-ovulatory phase, the inner spring phase, that's a time, it looks different for each of us. There's no like, none of this is set in stone in any way, but a lot of us experience a rising energy in that phase of the cycle. And I get a lot of anxiety there. So my job is really to contain this surge of energy. And I'm sure you experience this, Krista, but for anyone who is a creative or freelancer or runs their own business, just the wealth of ideas that can just splurge forth in us. And it's like, look, I'm only one person and I've only got so many
Hmm.
hours in the day. So my job there is to sort of contain these ideas. I have my Google Doc, which is my ideas doc, and I'm allowed to put them down, all the ideas down in there, but not take action on them. But really to really practice regulating my nervous system as a business owner in that week window, week long window, because it can be so overwhelming, this business thing. It's the wearing all the hats that we wear, the administrator, the marketing person, the project planner, the customer service, the
Hmm.
accountant, but also just the carrying the charge of the soul calling.
Hmm.
It's a
And I
lot
and I
more.
also think on a very practical and important level, recreating your paycheck
Totally.
over and over. Like my husband goes to work and his job isn't easy, but he doesn't have to wonder where the income is coming from to pay our bills, but I too contribute to our bills. Like so there's that because it brings up all the money stories, all the are you greedy? Are you selfish? What about there's poverty in the world? Are you allowed to hold anything for yourself?
Yes, it's so true. It's like it's so confronting. Running a business confronts us with all of these different conundrums and different aspects and facets of ourselves. Yeah, I don't want to collude with capitalism, but I need to pay my bills. And what's
Hmm.
the ethical, intuitive, relational way to do sales and marketing? It's like, oh, these are my favorite questions. But then coming into the summertime where I am now, around ovulation, this is where I'm best at connecting with people. Although I do connect and talk with people the whole way through my cycle, and I bring whatever energy I've got to that. It's not about
Hmm.
kind of rigidly scheduling my life. It's not possible. But I just know I can do a lot in this phase. I can really push it, a person who's burnt out 2 or 3 times at this point, and this is the time where I know I can go like work into the evenings, push it a little bit because then I'll get into my inner autumn, which is now my really happiest phase of the cycle. And in the premenstrual phase, that's where I how to describe it? That's where I become my own business coach. That's where I can see what is best for me to do next, what isn't working, what's ready to be pruned back. Um, I can just run it through the inner autumn program now inside me and just go, right, this is what I need to do. And I get really clear in that phase, and then it goes back into the bleed again.
Hmm.
But
What
yeah,
happens to with your nervous system in summer, in the summer season of your
well,
cycle?
because I tend to have much more energy, I don't seem to get burnt out. But if I'm not careful, when I get into inner autumn, I just get really ratty and crunchy if I haven't given myself enough space. I just forget about my needs. I
Yeah,
just pour everything into my family and my business in my inner summer. And
yeah,
the estrogen fueled, people pleasing, I can do everything for everyone person. And then my inner autumn comes around and goes, no, you're not. You have
yeah.
needs and you need to tend to them. And I do. And then,
And another point of why this is such an incredible practice around self-awareness and self-compassion and learning how to honor our wiring and capacity is like when you're menstrual cycle tracking, the seasons are short enough that you never get too far off track. Because
yes,
if you really are practicing, you're going to get reined back in.
totally. Yes. It's like the bliss of the sometimes horrible bliss of the inner autumn is it's just like, no, you can't keep doing this. And yeah, I
This
am
is
going
all
back in.
bullshit.
Yeah, yeah. It must all burn. But then and then the menstrual rest where I get to renew, fill my tank ready for the month ahead. So it's really about, yeah, working with whatever the powers are of each season and yielding to the vulnerabilities. Because I can't do a lot in a winter. If I try, then it's just chaos and I'm knackered. Yeah.
Um, One thing I would like to say about that, because it's coming up for me right now, because it's something that I'll be bringing into summer session of my Brave and Beautiful community, is about holding that tension, the between like summer and winter, where I think both of them can lead us to tip a little far into one way into the being and one way into the doing, and how learning how to trust our own bodies is the most important. But as we go, I think I have found that there is a lot of wisdom in remembering that it isn't only one thing. Like it's like that being and doing that, learning how to be in that flow, the ebb and flow is critical all the time. And so even in summer, like when we lean into like we have more sunlight and we want to be out more and things like that is like, and also don't bypass all your needs. Like, yes, you can stretch a bit to the edges of your capacity, but don't like notice that tendency to override in winter where we can like really hunker down and become more sluggish or even passive or whatever, or even go deep into the dreaming. It's like I find like, and also remember to also tend to your needs, also get out for walks. Like it's like, yeah. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
just something that I've been
Little
thinking lots about.
homeopathic doses from the other seasons inside the
Yeah.
seasons. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, beautiful.
And what I think here the reason it came up is because you said that the menstruality podcast was you didn't use this language, but I was thinking like an anchor in the
Yeah.
storm, so to speak. And my membership community, I started it 2 or 3 weeks before a car accident, and then my son died 3 weeks later. So it was like I started it and then chaos. And but it was like an anchor in the storm because like there's something positive to keep showing up for, like, and like you tell me if this is true for you, but integrity is really important, so I'm never going to tell somebody to do something that I'm not practicing. So in serving others, it kept me doing my work.
Yes.
Did you feel that in
Oh yeah, 100%. And it was something that was so meaningful, just so inherently meaningful. And I could just rest back into it. I feel like it was, I feel like with our businesses, and I do see the podcast as a business, even though it's not anyway, income generating necessarily. But I think we pour loads of energy into them, especially at the beginning. And then at a certain point, the momentum shifts and they can feed us. So it
Mm,
becomes this beautiful, cyclical, virtuous circle where it's not just give, give, give to the business all the time, but it becomes this, resource, an oasis. That's what the podcast felt like, an oasis that I could just come and lie next to and drink from and just be
mm,
restored, even as I was, like, quote unquote, working. Yeah.
mm.
Working much less hard than in my parenting work life, which is like the hardest job I've ever had for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sophie, thank you so much for all of your time, your abundance of time. I've loved every second of the conversation, and I feel like all we've done is open up multiple portals where we could like dive in. Um, would you like to share anything about how people can connect with you? Maybe a favorite way to connect or something
Yeah.
you'd like them to know?
Yeah, I mean, in this spring phase, I'm in a kind of relaunch moment. So I'm just sort of rebuilding my website and all that again. So Instagram is probably the best place because that's where I am. Sophie.jane.hardy on Instagram.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here with me.
It's been
So,
so wonderful. Thank you for your gorgeous questions and everything you shared. Thanks, Kristen.
okay. Bye.